Now, can we see the screen? It's all working? Wonderful. Thank you so much again for inviting me back. It's an absolute pleasure. So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. We are gathering today in both physically and virtually constructed spaces and places, and it's always important for me that we take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place and recognise the traditional lands on which we are joining together from today. And today I would also like to acknowledge the tangata whenua who are present online. Today I am personally joining from Wadawurrung country in beautiful Geelong in Victoria, and I pay my respects to the Indigenous elders who have cared for these lands for centuries. So a little bit of context before I begin, just to set the scene. Australia has 41 universities, about 150 campuses. You can see where they're dispersed on the map. We love hanging out close to the beach. There isn't a lot in the middle of our country in terms of population, so we do tend to educate most Australians on the coasts. We've got about 1.6 million learners studying in Australian higher education, and for the context of this presentation, about 175,000 students are studying at Australian universities online. The two universities that I'll be speaking about predominantly today are Deakin and La Trobe, and you can see they're ranked 4 and 10 in terms of the total number of students that are studying online. I think what's interesting when you look at that table, though, is some institutions will have up to 80% of their students that are studying online, and those institutions tend to be smaller regional universities that are really committed to educating students from across the diversity of our country. I have recently worked at La Trobe. I've been at Deakin for about 6 months now, and when you do a deep dive of La Trobe's online learning community, you'll see that it is spread pretty much across the country. The outline there is La Trobe's, what we would call the regional catchment. It aligns to the 5 campuses of La Trobe University. Now, while we've got learners across the country, and we are supporting quite a significant number of students, the challenge for Australian higher education is that online learners are 20% more likely to drop out of their study than on-campus students, so retention is a major challenge for us, and they are 2.5 times lower or less likely to complete their degrees overall. And obviously their degrees take longer, and it is more difficult to support these students and keep them engaged in their communities. So I will give you some examples from not only the two institutions, but an international institution, Harvard University, as well as give a shout out to the Australian government who are supporting Australian higher education and thinking differently about how we support online learners. When we work through understanding what it means to have a successful online support environment for a student, the curriculum, like it is for an on-campus experience, the curriculum is the most important thing that we can put in place to support a learner to be successful. Deakin University has been leading Australia in terms of its curriculum approach and the way that it has supported students, and it is one of the few universities in the country where student outcomes and student experience for online learners is close to being equivalent for the rest of the cohort. So we've almost achieved parity in that space, which is a fantastic outcome. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Deakin's approach to curriculum design, because there's some really cool things that Deakin has been doing for a very long time in supporting students who are studying in a distance way. Now, when I first joined Deakin, it's a really cool place, and it has a really long history of doing distance education really, really well. So they started distance education in 1976, back when they were sending out paper-based booklets that students would work their way through, and having telephone conversations with learners to provide support services. When they moved up into around the late teens, so 2018, 2019, Deakin made a big push to bring as much of its content into the digital environment as possible. They were using an LMS prior to that, but in 2018, they really took a high quality approach to generating online content for learners. Over the last 5 years, that approach has transformed, and Deakin has continued to build upon their online learning approach. So now it is less about great quality experience for students who are studying in online degrees, but actually now the whole of the institution takes a cloud first or an online first approach to curriculum design and delivery. So in that way, at Deakin, we consider all learners to be online learners, whether they're studying synchronously, asynchronously, on campus, or from the comfort of their own homes. We are treating students equally in the way that we are supporting their learning and the design of the learning environment. This is a really important component and is really the key to success. So we've all got experiences where students are using a learning management system. We've got content that we're putting within those systems, so using our LMS sites sometimes as content repositories. In the approach that Deakin has embedded across all of the courses, they're really flipping the way that we're thinking about how we develop content, to make sure that if we're bringing a student to campus, or if we're bringing a student into an online learning environment, that there is a purpose for being there, that it's worth that student's time, and that they are really able to engage in a positive and supported learning experience when they're in that collaborative environment. And importantly, when they are studying online in their own time, using more learner-guided activities or activities where an academic has curated an experience for them to work through independently, that those experiences are something that the student can do themselves without any additional assistance wherever possible. To embed that approach, we have a series of what we call the Deakin design principles that are all about intentionally and purposefully designing curriculum experiences that recognize a student as a whole person, that encourage and empower students to be able to work their way through their learning experiences in a positive and supported way. The learning is authentic in that it is connected to industry, it's connected to real work. It helps students to connect what they know or what they're learning in terms of a theoretical perspective with how that would be applied in the real world. Digital is part of everything that we do, but there are very intentional components within the curriculum that help to build digital capabilities for students and to ensure that they're using the kinds of technologies that they will be using when they're in the workplace. Feedback is something that happens progressively through the entire learning experience for students. So if they are studying independently, getting ready for class, there will be feedback opportunities throughout that process. But then there's also more structured feedback in class as well as on assessment work. What I really like about the approach is that inclusion is part of the fabric of how subjects are designed. So universal design for learning is a fundamental pillar of the approach. We've still got a way to go there, but it's really important that we're thinking about who are our learners, what do they need to be successful, and how can we create the right kind of environment for them. Active and collaborative learning, again, that's critical to how the learning environment functions, and it's really intentional in terms of how we're bringing students together. We do take a course-wide approach to the way that we structure curriculum, thinking about how all of the components that a student is learning integrates together, but then also helping a student to really see how those components fit within the breadth of their courses. So what does that look like in practice? Well, in practice, as I said, a student would be able to do engage with the content online in their own time in a way that works for them, and in a way that means they don't need a lot of intervention from the academic in that preparation phase. So it's all about empowering that learner to be able to feel confident and safe to be able to engage with the material that's there. The design itself supports a student to both engage with the content, to make sure that they have an opportunity to engage with their teachers. But importantly, each subject also has intentional activities where students will also engage with their peers. Again, a really important component, not only in terms of building knowledge, but in terms of that feedback loop as well. We call them sequenced online packages when we're designing a unit site, a subject site. We call them units. Generally, there's a mixture of online or video introductions, or sometimes text introductions, that really anchor the student to what they're doing and why it's important. So really the so what. We help students to understand how they might be able to engage with the readings or the materials that are available. There's always extra help resources, FAQs, other links that are ways for students to be able to get help, including being able to contact the academic team for additional support as they're working through their learning. And one of the really cool things is that every time a student sits down to prepare before they come to class, there is our call to action. So it's really about how are they going to apply what they're learning and test it before they get to come into class to unpack it even more. As I've mentioned before, it's a lot. If I were bringing a student to class, either online or face-to-face, it's all about engagement, and it's all about giving students opportunities to receive feedback. Now that was a lot, and that was quick. Sorry, I've got a big bit of time, big bit of stuff to squeeze in. When you think about when you look at the Deakin design principles and the way that we've approached building subjects, you go, yeah, sure, that's just great. That's just great learning design. It makes sense. Deakin didn't get there by chance. The 40 plus years of distance education helped. But also, I think what's important for institutions to also think through is what are the environments that we create that enable academics and teaching teams to really be able to do this kind of work. It is about deep scholarly practice, and we are very fortunate to have Cradle as a research centre that is supporting assessment and curriculum design for us, but also across the sector. We do have a genuine culture of innovation at Deakin, which is really cool. People get to kind of try out fun new stuff, and they do genuinely love working together. But we have a dedicated team of learning designers, and that is quite substantial, who will work alongside academics to create some really high quality content. But at the same time, as you begin to scaffold that, what we're working through is empowering academics to be able to develop and record their own videos without necessarily needing a big production team, which was certainly the way that Deakin approached it in 2018. Now it is far more gritty and real, if you like, with the academics recording the content themselves. it is about partnership for us, and mainly that partnership is with students and industry. So students are a big part of the way in which we design our courses and our learning experiences. So we've got a series of opportunities for you to reflect. Probably don't have enough time for us to have a huge deep dive discussion. But what I have done is created a Padlet. So if you've used a Padlet before, please feel free to scan the QR code. When you scan that code, it'll take you to an online site, and the first question will be there. And the first question I'm interested in your reflections on would be, what would you need to be true in your organization for you to take an online first approach to curriculum design? So that's our first question. I'll give us a few minutes, start throwing down your ideas. You can change your name. You don't always have to be anonymous, but some of the anonymous things that come up are pretty cool. So if you become the charismatic cheater, you get a prize today. All right, so you can vote up and down people's comments. Yeah, some interesting ones there. Digital literacy for staff and learners, that's a big one. So we've, what I've noticed over the years, pre-COVID and then post-COVID, was the digital literacy of both learners and academics really went through the roof. So the things that were not possible for us to do as organizations pre-COVID, or that took us so long to kind of get happening, now are far easier. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the spaces, because there's really been a shift there. Organizational commitment, yes, massive one. It has to come from the top, and that's really, you need that commitment from a strategy level, and then you need a willingness and a culture that embraces innovation and the ability to, and the permission for people to fail. And that was something, watching from the outside, that Deakin did extraordinarily well. So they had a few amazing DVC A's, one of them being Beverly Oliver, that really kicked off the cloud first approach. And her approach was very much try it out, we'll wrap support around you, and this is something that we want to do and we want to do well. Access and equity, yes, we have to have that all the way through. Clear lines of communications, again, beautiful one. I like the one about the subject needing to be suitable for online delivery. That one's really interesting, and I wouldn't mind exploring that a bit more at the end of the session, once we jump into questions, because again, I think COVID showed us that even though online is not the same as remote delivery, and moving things to remote delivery was certainly something that we did. There are some subjects, yes, that we potentially can't do wholly online. But in this approach, every subject can have a component that's online. And I think that's what is really interesting in the approach. Support from the organisation, yeah. Fostering Maori values online. I would love to hear more about that when we get into the Q&A session at the end. Thank you. So let me jump into the next kind of case study, so we've got time to have to unpack this discussion. So La Trobe University took a slightly different approach to the way it was thinking about online learning. So La Trobe, as around the similar time that Deakin was really going gangbusters in the online space, La Trobe thought, had a strategy as well, like a number of Australian universities did, that they would set up this kind of online arm of the university. Interestingly, that didn't work. It was a failure for the university, and I joined La Trobe soon after that project had really, people weren't very keen on online at all. Over time, we started working through what could part online delivery start to look like. And COVID was really the shift that reset La Trobe's approach to online. So in that way was a really big gift for that institution in terms of its approach to being able to support more diverse learners from across the country. And when La Trobe was embarking on rethinking its approach to online learning, it was really about, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? And the purpose was to meet the mission to provide accessible education for people from across the country, but importantly within the cohort that were studying at La Trobe at the time, students were really telling us that they weren't able to fit study around their life. So while La Trobe increased the number of fully online degrees they had, they also worked through a plan which we called StudyFlex at the time, or we still call it StudyFlex now. And what StudyFlex is the capacity for a student to be able to choose whether they study online or face-to-face in a particular subject. And they can either do that at the subject level. We would tag a StudyFlex major if that major had that flexibility and choice available for at least half of its subjects. And that rolled up into the course level, where we would have particular courses within the course portfolio where students could have that choice across more than a third of their subjects and a minimum of 2 of their majors that were available to them. So people often ask, does that mean a student can wake up one morning and say, hey, I want to do my subject online today? That was the ultimate. That's really what I was hoping we could have got to. Our technology and the systems prevented us from getting that far. So instead, what a student would do is, if they've enrolled in a StudyFlex subject or a StudyFlex course or major, they will pick that subject, and at enrollment, they'll say whether they want to choose the online version of that subject or the face-to-face version of that subject. It was incredibly popular. Went from, in the first ever offering of it, more than 4,500 students chose to undertake the StudyFlex option. And now, or last year, more than 15,000 students were doing StudyFlex subjects as part of their courses. There are 27 courses within the course portfolio, so just over 10% of the courses in La Trobe's portfolio are tagged as StudyFlex. But importantly, of those 27 courses are some of the largest in the university. So the Bachelor of Arts, the Bachelor of Business, Criminology, the Bachelor of Science, the Bachelor of Health Sciences all have the option for students to take StudyFlex subjects. Psychological science was another one as well. So a spread of disciplines from across the institution. When you complement, and when we thought about online learners and StudyFlex as a mode of delivery, if you like, so students can have that choice. The other really critical part of La Trobe's story was an intentional focus around taking an online first approach to the way that they were designing student support services. So it was really a time of reflection to be able to step back and say, are our support services really available and supporting students that could be studying anywhere across the country? And the strong answer was no. online students were generally missing out on access to support or engagement activities. They couldn't get access to help outside of hours when our mature learners were actually free to be able to do their online study. And often what we were also doing was scheduling classes for students in the middle of the day if they were studying online. So it was a really important moment for La Trobe in working in partnership with students to truly understand what the online student experience was really like. And La Trobe picked up a lot of the learnings from Deakin that had published quite widely about their approach. So the curriculum design within those units or within those subjects was really great. Paired that with then student support services that enabled students to use a chat feature that gave them answers to questions when they needed help. Rethinking student support service hours, which meant that frontline services didn't close at 5 o'clock. Students could connect with a counsellor at 7. They could ask La Trobe, which was the front-facing student administration, was open from early in the morning till later at night, opened on a Saturday. We partnered with Studiosity and transitioned from the general Studiosity platform to the Studiosity Plus AI platform to make sure that students had access to learning support 24 hours a day on demand when they needed it. And the library really stepped up and did a phenomenal job of working with academics across the institution to make sure that every learning resource that was being asked of a student, so textbooks or readings or any other resource that a student needed, that they were all available digital and free. Now, we didn't quite get all the way. I think it's up to 97%, I think, when I left, of the resources that students would need to be able to study were available online. Now, that not only supported increased access, but it saved students a huge amount of money, which was really important. The student support team and the student associations really focused on events that were happening online. They learnt a lot during COVID about how to do that. Some of the most popular catch-up events were actually online events, which was really cool, and people had their cameras on, which was always surprising. And the last one was an intentional view to think about our campuses as a learning network. And the program initially was called Regional Connect, changed to be called La Trobe Connect, which meant that a student who was studying online anywhere in Victoria who were close to one of our campuses to begin with were able to use that campus as a hub to be able to engage with the university. We found that there were online students studying in Shepparton, just down the road from the campus, who never came on to campus because they didn't feel like they were welcomed. So it was really intentional outreach to students to bring them into campus if they lived close by and to give them a purpose and a reason to be there. All right. So I mentioned that La Trobe was using its own campuses to help students who are studying online to study. But one of the really cool things that La Trobe also did was partnered with a group of centres from across the country that had been supported by the Australian government. And these were called the Regional University Study Centres. And a group of them called the Country University Centres were ones that La Trobe really closely partnered with. So I think this, in terms of access to higher education in Australia, this has to be one of the best things that I've seen the Australian government do. They have now supported 56 regional study centres. They are all across Australia, and there is one also opening up on Norfolk Island. What these places do, it gives students a quiet, safe, place that they can come to study, where they get access to high-speed internet, because that is a major issue for us in regional Australia. It allows students to be able to stay home in their communities, to continue to live on country and to be connected and to study while they're working. It is an absolute game changer. Students are loving it. The interesting part, though, and this is a regional study centre that was just down the road from where I used to live in regional Victoria, was that these university study centres became places where universities would use them as marketing sites and not think about true partnership. Now, these centres are run by the community, for the community, which is one of the really cool things about them. And when I walked into the Bass Coast Country University Centre, I had a chat to them about what it was like, which universities they work for, and they were quite scathing about the relationships that they had. And that was a massive opportunity. And it's like, let's start working with these country university centres. And there's this amazing academic at La Trobe. She's the Pro Vice-Chancellor Regional, called Mel Bish, who set up this fantastic partnership with the Country University Centre. And now what happens is students who are studying online through La Trobe will spend their time studying at their local university centre. We actively promote those university centres, and La Trobe actually works alongside some of these university centre staff to help them understand our systems and processes, to provide them mentorship and support. And it really is about true, genuine partnership within those communities. And it is having a really big impact on the way that online learners are able to connect, particularly into La Trobe degrees. So big plug for that. I can't wait to see how it works. There's not a huge amount of learners using them at the moment, but they're growing exponentially, which is a real credit to our government. I'll finish quickly by speaking through spaces, and I'm not going to show you the whole video, but one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time in online education is the Harvard Business School online classroom.
The live online classroom fundamentally changed my expectations of what's possible with online learning.
The live online studio is just about as close to the classroom as you can possibly get without being in it.
The live online classroom technology is very impressive.
It is a super modern version of our normal classroom.
There is this incredible studio where you have the professor standing there and these large screens, and you're interacting with you.
You see the professors jumping up and down, running around, writing on blackboards just like in real life, like you were there in person.
So what's the difference between the companies that do come back and the companies that kind of continue on that line?
There's a huge wall that has about 100 large screens on it. And you can see when a student is leaning forward because they're really interested, or when they go back and they cross their arms because they don't agree with something.
Chris, you're leaning into this picture almost.
Each participant has his or her own distinct camera. They have nearly 100 speakers in their classrooms. So if I hear someone speak, then I get directional information. I could look you straight in the face. So I can make individual interactions.
You can see the professor teachings. We can see one another through the wallboard.
You actually have an opportunity to observe more people at a time.
So I'd encourage you to go and watch the full video. It is pretty cool. I've been lucky enough to walk through and it felt like educational Disneyland to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to teach in this space. It was really cool. But not all of us are Harvard. We can't do this. Like, let's get real. Like, it's pretty cool that they can. And I wanted to show you what might be possible if you have like tens of millions of dollars laying around, which I don't think any of us do. But interestingly, both Deakin and La Trobe took different types of approaches to spaces. At Deakin, because they really focused on online education pre-COVID, they were moving through what was called a hybrid approach to education, online education. So you had students in the classroom, you had students online. They would be generally two academics, one who was watching the chat of the students who were online, and then the students that were sitting in these really quite sophisticated classrooms, all mic'd up, lots of projectors, these big flat floor rooms that could seat up to a couple of hundred students. And we have basically phased these kinds of rooms and that kind of synchronous online approach, so students in the classroom as well as students online at the same time, basically phasing that out across Deakin. It was quite difficult for our academic staff. It was really a disparate experience for the students who were studying online, and it made the learning design quite fragmented in terms of the way that the students were interacting with each other. La Trobe had a similar experience. They were teaching across regional campuses at the same time, but the challenge there was that all the regional students were always online and all the metropolitan students were always face-to-face. So the regional students were the ones who were most disadvantaged, and they loved COVID because it meant that they had that level playing field experience to their learning. So really, we moved away from this kind of hybrid approach where the two cohorts were together to being quite distinct and saying this is a face-to-face class. This is an online version of the same class. You'll get the same learning experience, but that actually everyone's there. And we've all had experiences of that in meetings. And that approach actually really took the pressure off academics. And as we implemented online learning at La Trobe while I was there, that was a real game changer. Academics who had been working in that space before really said, I feel like I can give my online students the full experience now. So something to consider.